British Embassy at the Holy See and Embassy of Peru at the Holy See, who both patronage this event. I should like to thank you all for your participation and for your presence. WUCWO, an international public association of faithful, whose aim is to promote co-responsibility, participation in society and in the church, for them to be able to work for human development, has 109 years of history, now has important, eminent speakers to offer you today. We are going to listen to their interventions, and then there will be the Q&A session, a dialogue with them. So we should like to start with Maria Elvira Velázquez Rivas Plata, Ambassador of Peru at the Holy See, and she will welcome you here. Maria Elvira Velázquez Rivas Plata has presented her credential letters on December the 7th, 2015. Before, she held many offices at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Peru as a General Director of the Treaties, as the Director of Maritime Affairs and Antarctic Affairs, and the Counselor of the Office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. She has served for the Peru mission in the UK, in the USA, in Austria, and in the Chancellorship of Peru in Ecuador. Over to you, Madam. Thank you very much.
Saluto di benvenuto.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, dear friends, and all the people supporting us here. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and for being with us today in the room, attending in the room or via streaming. We anticipate a few days, the March the 8th, that the UN has set as the World Women's Day. For the Ambassador Sally Axworthy and for myself, it's a great honor to hold this meeting under our patronage at this event promoted by Maria Lia Dervino as the President General of the World Union of Catholic Women Organizations. And we wish her all the best for her new office. We should like to thank also Flaminia Giovanelli and Madam Martina Liebesch, who accompany us today. So thank you very much for accepting this initiative. I should like to thank Mother Carmen Samat, President of the International Union of Superiors General, who have welcomed us in this institutional quarters. We should like to say you all our gratitude for the great work of social and pastoral work of your members to support those who suffer from exclusion, rejection, and indifference in society. So thank you very much for being here in this day to recognize women that across the world work to support their rights for justice in favor of peace and development. Women who are promoters of hope in a world that seems to be less and less humane. Today we observe that thanks to the decisive action that women have performed for them to be recognized and to see the justice and equality recognized to them, principles at national and international levels were developed to support public policies of prevention, of protection of women's rights, as well as of promotion of women's participation in the different fields of the society. Their voices are stronger and stronger and more and more numerous. Every day, we, the women, we feel the value of our participation in public life, and we want this right to be recognized. Every day, we show that we are committed to change and our capability of get associated and of networking to work for our objectives. We've made progress, but as the Peruvian poet Cesar Vallejo would say, dear brothers and sisters, there's still much to be done. Statistical data show that despite all the challenges that have been taken up, there are many challenges yet to be taken up, considering the discrimination, the indifference, the violence, and now the importance of these challenges, considering the history and the social and economic situation of our country, the importance of our work, considering also the international framework. These challenges become more and more important in this great change we've been living through, that questions, paradigms, and the way of thinking and the relations amongst us and between us. And we sometimes are disoriented, and we have this fear across the world that blocks dialogue and encounter. These are challenges where the voices of women adds up to the cry of the poor and the cry of Mother Earth.
Oh, lost it.
No voice.
Es un reto que demanda una buena política. Aquella que, como nos recordó el Santo Padre en su mensaje por el Día Mundial de la Paz, tiene como base la justicia, la equidad, el respeto mutuo, la sinceridad, la honestidad y la fidelidad.
And faithfulness. We need to continue to live together, to open up roads of peace and encounter in our common home. Now, the message of the Holy See I've just mentioned provides us with different elements to consider this matter. And here I quote, the genuine political life based in dialogue, genuine dialogue amongst protagonists is renewed under the conviction that every human being, man and woman, and every generation close in themselves a promise that can free up new intellectual, relational, cultural, and spiritual energies. Now, the testimonies of our speakers who are bearers of hope, I'm more than sure they're going to inspire us and to strengthen our commitment, our dreams. Before handing over to them, I should like to conclude by mentioning a meeting that was held last year here in Rome in the same date. And I consider this as being a reason for hope. This was the plenary assembly of the Pontifical Committee for Latin America. And the theme was the woman as a pillar in building society and the church in Latin America. And this decision shows the commitment of the Holy Father for the conditions of women, not only within the church, but at the world level. And we should like to thank him for this commitment. Now, the words mentioned, uttered in a meeting with the committee of Salem in 2017 inspired the theme of the day that we are celebrating with you today. On that occasion, the Pope said, hope in Latin America has the face of a woman. There's no need to talk too much about the role of women in our continent and within our church. And in her mouth, we have learned faith. With her milk, we've acquired the characteristics of our soul and immunity when faced with despair. And I'm thinking of indigenous women, of city women who make 3 shifts at work, catechists, consecrated women, and so on and so forth. Without women, the church in that continent would lose its strength of be renewed and be reborn. Women with their patience light and light over and over again the fire of faith. So there's a need to promote, to enhance the ecclesial and social strength of what women do in that continent.
Oh.
Now the assembly, presided over by Cardinal Marco Oye, has brought together the cardinals of the Commission and 15 women representing the Academia of Latin America and the 3 ambassadors of Latin America of Panama, Nicaragua, and Peru. That was a moment of experience of mutual listening and understanding. It was a genuine dialogue, creative dialogue, and the members of the Commission had the opportunity of contrasting and comparing their visions with the realities of the history of women in our countries and the lives of women that have been invited. As I've signaled, as Cardinal Oye said in an interview about that meeting, I quote, "Women, church, and the world, the genuine dialogue changes us." So I felt the presence of the Spirit, and this is the key. So I'm sure that all of us, the women represented in this room, we all share this feeling. So I should like to thank you for your presence and for whatever you've been doing for women and for our world. Thank you very much. Thank you for your solidarity, for your presence in solidarity, and for all the initiatives that you've been taking. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador, for these brilliant words and for your message that went straight forward to the art. And now I should like to hand over to Dr. Maria Lia Zervino, the President General of WUCWO. She belongs to consecrated women, servidoras. She is graduated in sociology. She specialized in social communication, and she's always worked for justice and peace, following the prospect of women. She will be dealing with WUCWO women, promoters of hope. Over to you, President. Thank you very much. I see the representatives of Talita Kum, and they are standing over there, but you can come here because there are other people standing, but we have 10 seats, 10 places here. So please come in the first rows, in first tables. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to you all. It's a great pleasure to be here today. And I fully agree with what the ambassador has just said. I should like to seize this opportunity to thank the 2 embassies supporting this event, the embassy of the UK and of Peru to the Holy See. It has been and it is always a pleasure to work with you, to cooperate with you, and to organize the common events, namely when the issue at stake are women, as is the case of today. I should like really to welcome the men who are attending this meeting, and I ask you to give them a big round of applause. And now, let's start. I don't know how I can connect to this. Thank you very much for assisting me. As you may know, we WUCWO women, we are convinced that hope has the face of a woman. And we know that 70% of the solidarity actions across the world are exercised by women, promoters of hope. And I should like to say that almost 10 million women members of WUCWO, or members of our member organizations, 50, 60 member organizations that we do have across the world. Well, these women not only carry the value of hope, but they are promoters of hope. But let me show you a few examples. If, for example, we go in the region of Amazonia in Venezuela, we can see that in this area, one of our member organizations has worked with the Warao ethnicity, and women here suffer from violence, sexual exploitation, hunger, and diseases. So these women have tried to organize workshops with them at crucial moments of the history of this country, Venezuela. I should like to share with you the fact that the Council of lay members of Venezuela is presided over by a woman, a member of WUCWO. Other women of WUCWO, promoters of hope, are there to welcome migrants, refugees, and this is the case of Mexico at the frontier with the US, but also in Africa, where in Swaziland, where they carry medicines, clothes, food in refugee camps. They protect, for example, migrants in Cameroon. Migrants that have been prosecuted and need to try and find a shelter in the woods, but also in Australia, where migrants are poor. Sometimes they are pregnant. They are promoters of hope with the families of migrants. For example, in the UK, in Canada, where women are accompanied for them to try to have citizenship. And for example, in Calabria, south of Italy, they run the so-called women's home, giving a shelter to women surviving after having crossed the Mediterranean basin. So these women are given the possibility of regain their self-esteem. WUCWO women, promoters of hope through education, to reach out to the arts of many children and young women in parishes, in peripheral areas, in training and vocational training centers, and children and young people can organize very beautiful concerts, though they come from very poor farming areas. Now, all this continuing to pass on the values of faith, respecting the planet and safeguarding the planet from Polynesia, because we do have organizations also over there to the northern part of Great Britain, the northern pole, and the southward as well, including Argentina, the southernmost city of Argentina. So little by little, step by step, through educating new generations, there's a wind that is produced that can become stronger and stronger and can be turned into a positive tsunami to foster culture, peace, to foster equality, equal opportunities between men and women, fostering respect for life from the conception. And this thanks to their political, civilian commitment to bring about a deep cultural change. And also women who work for other women to become promoters of hope. For example, in Gabon, where one of our organizations provides technical assistance and training to produce soaps or oils using local plants, local vegetables, and they help these women who were not self-reliant in economic terms. Now they've become self-reliant, independent, and they are part of the economy of the country. Or in Gambia, in Ghana, they have provided training courses for women, for other women to become trainers. So they've fought against human trafficking, and a national plan has been developed in Ghana and in Gabon, in these two countries, with the participation of mothers in Ghana who have gained authority for local communities. These best practices of women promoters of hope at basic grassroots level, all this makes the wealth, the richness of WUCWO that encourages us to cooperate with the Holy See and to get committed together with other organizations, Catholic-inspired organizations, to be present and to give a voice, an international voice to women, and to try and tackle the issues of Christian women. We do have international representatives in COSOC, in New York, in UNESCO, in Paris, in the FAO, in Rome, and in the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. Over the period 2018-2022, we're going to work on 4 major guidelines: a healthy planet, family and their most vulnerable members, violence and discrimination against women, following number 212 of Evangelii Gaudium, and then vocation and the call to holiness, as Gaudete et Exultate points to. So we tackle international issues because we do have hope. We are hopeful. Hope stemming from many leading women and the synergy that little by little is generated amongst our organizations. And thanks to the collaborative work that we do perform with the permanent missions to the Holy See and other organizations and institutions. Some of them are present and attending this meeting in this room. And we do hope that very, very soon, many of them are prepared to cooperate with us and to work together in this collaborative task. And for this reason, I should like to put in your hands all this. So I should like to ask you to disseminate the message for the International Women's Day. For the day, March the 8th. Today, we can say that we, the women, we are promoters of hope. When there are open wounds, a planet that cries out for the destruction that we are inflicting upon it and upon human beings, namely women and children, enslaved, victims of discrimination, and we want to put an end to this cry. These are the wounds of Jesus in today's world: the migration of unaccompanied children, the forced separation of families, refugees due to conflicts or wars, who live in inhuman conditions, the human trafficking for sexual exploitation, trafficking of organs, surrogate mothers, the victims of the trade of arms, of drugs, trafficked women, abused women, discriminated women due to machismo, to hedonistic culture that find in abortion and a solution to the unequal distribution of wealth. So families without food, without clothes, when science and technology applied to integral ecology would allow us to live in fraternity by safeguarding our common home. With the women, we represent 71% of the 40 million people suffering modern enslavement, and we are at the same time called upon to be women promoters of hope. This is what we need and what our society and our church do need. Women capable of irradiating mercy from their wombs, women who would like to give life and never, ever reduce or eliminate life. Women who dare to go out to encounter those who are suffering and that could accompany those who are most in need. Women acting for maternal love, capable of silent sacrifice and creativity. Women evangelizing with their tongues, with their gestures of tenderness, and relieving people for the open wounds of our Lord Jesus Christ. Women who act out of conviction because they are convinced that they can turn the world into something beautiful, because we are aware of the fact that the society we would like to have is built little by little, day after day, through collaborative work of men and women on an equal footing for their dignity, though their identities are different. We, the women of 2019, we can relieve somehow the wounds of our Lord Jesus Christ by bringing about hope, by bringing about creative love, and by working with strength. We do not want to fall our arms, but we would like to be part of a communitarian, of a collective work. If we do share the ideals and work with men with the same passion for the safeguard of our world as our common home, and this means long-term protecting the most vulnerable, as Pope Francis invites us to do. We have to put into practice with joy actions and omissions around us that, though they are small, have as their ultimate goal to try and find a solution to the tragic situations of today. So women, we have to be promoters of hope. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President, for your very beautiful words and your intervention, and for this message of hope that you wanted to share with us, and which represents all of us for the fact of being women. Thank you very much. And now I should like to hand over to Her Excellency Sally Axworthy, the British Ambassador to the Holy See. Madam Sally Axworthy started as Ambassador of Her Majesty to the Holy See in September 2016. Previous roles were in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign and Commonwealth Office, amongst them head of Department of North Africa, the Department of Somalia, and Director for Corporate Services in India. She also worked in Germany, the Ukraine, and Russia. Madam, the Ambassador Axworthy, she's married with Michael Axworthy, and she has 4 children. The title of her intervention is Working Together with the Religious to fight against modern forms of slavery and to prevent sexual violence in conflicts. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about women in foreign policy, and specifically in British foreign policy, and how we have worked together with the religious sisters. So how our aims have come together, and how important the religious sisters are to us on certain of our foreign policy objectives. So a slight change of focus, but I hope it will be interesting. So diplomacy increasingly addresses global problems. I mean, I think we think of diplomacy as being focused on geopolitical problems, but increasingly we all work on things that affect all of us. And I've given you some examples here. Climate change, which is a common concern, and these are some of the things that the British government has done. We've done some work on illegal wildlife trade. We have a very major fund to combat climate change, particularly with developing countries, and we've done a big focus on the marine environment. We also champion human rights and democracy. At the moment, we're having a big focus on persecution of Christians. But we've also been running a campaign on 12 years of quality education for every girl, and that's been focused on the Commonwealth. And we work on reducing terrorism, extremism, and weapons proliferation. And again, there are some of the things we've done there. And we see women as very much part of the solution to some of these issues. As you will know, there is a campaign on women, peace and security in the UN, on which we're working very closely with Peru. And we have a national action plan that's focused on particular countries and bringing women into the peace processes in those countries. And also integrating gender perspectives into peacekeeping operations. We focus on education for girls, as I mentioned, with our Education Can't Wait Fund. And increasingly women are active in diplomacy. And although that may seem something very obvious, when I joined the Foreign Office 33 years ago, it wasn't so obvious. I don't think we had any women ambassadors 33 years ago. And now we have 30%, which you might say is not enough, but it's better than it was. And in the Holy See, of course, we have a very active group of female ambassadors. And last year rather, the recruits to the Foreign Office were actually more women than men. So I want to talk about two initiatives that we work on where we've worked, which are of particular significance for women, and where we've worked with the religious sisters. So the first is preventing sexual violence in conflict, and this really came out of the experience of one of the special advisors in the Foreign Office, who was from Bosnia-Herzegovina, and who'd seen firsthand during the war there the effect of rape being used as a weapon of war. And she, with the then Foreign Secretary, Lord Haig, and Angelina Jolie, launched this initiative on preventing sexual violence in conflict. And it's really aimed at trying to stop rape being used as a weapon of war, which is clearly a very big challenge. And so the way we've been doing that is we've been doing lots of work, but tackling stigma faced by survivors of sexual violence, trying to bring the perpetrators to justice, and also trying to prevent sexual violence, trying to combat the idea that sexual violence is an acceptable way of terrorizing populations or advancing military aims. And later this year, we'll have a big conference in London to look at what we've achieved over the last 5 years and to launch the next phase of the initiative. So we noticed some synergies with what the religious sisters are doing on this. I should say religious sisters, but also religious brothers, because one of our main partners was actually a religious brother. But in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the religious orders work to support survivors. And so they do this in areas where there are very few support services, and they take in people who've been victims of sexual violence, and they basically rehabilitate them. And so we asked Father Bernard Auger, who runs a home for survivors of sexual conflict, what we could do to work with them. And out of that came this training program that we ran with the Union of International Superiors General. And they gathered all their sisters and brothers and some priests who work with survivors of sexual conflict. We did this first in Democratic Republic of Congo and then in Uganda. And they were providing some pastoral training for their sisters. And we added into this some training on what we call the International Protocol, which it says its full title is on the documentation and investigation of sexual violence in conflict. And the International Protocol aims to make it possible to prosecute crimes. So the religious orders were focused very much on their pastoral support, on accompaniment of victims and rehabilitation. And we added in this, this training on preserving evidence to give the prospect, one day we hope, of prosecution, so that there should be some accountability. And so we felt our respective strengths came together, the pastoral strengths of the religious orders and the focus on the international legal framework that we felt we brought to that. And there you can see I think the lady on the right is actually from the British Embassy or the British Consulate in Goma, with Sister Sheila Kinsey, who organised this. The second area on which we've worked with the religious sisters is on modern slavery, and you'll all be very aware of Talitha Kum, the network of sisters who work on this. So the UK, again, the UK is very motivated to combat modern slavery, and that really came out of an incident in the early 2000s when a number of young Chinese men were drowned in Morecambe Bay, picking shellfish. And so they were being exploited by gangmasters, paid very little. None of them spoke any English. None of them had any local knowledge. They didn't know about the tides. And the tide came in, and a number of them, around 20 of them, were drowned. And that really motivated the British government and also the British people, I think, to tackle modern slavery. And we started with the gangs, with these gangs that are used in agriculture, and it's developed on from there, and it's now, of course, a priority for very many countries. But just there are a few statistics there about modern slavery. So it's estimated that around 40 million people worldwide are in conditions of slavery, including forced labor, domestic work, construction, agriculture, prostitution. So it's a sort of a huge problem, and that women and girls are disproportionately affected in some sectors. 99% of victims in the sex industry, and 58% in other sectors. Our response has been domestic and international. So in the UK, we've tried to do everything we can to eliminate modern slavery, which is very difficult. But we set up the Gangmasters Licensing Authority, and then we had this landmark piece of legislation in 2015, which brought together all the offences relating to modern slavery, and it also set up or it improved the systems for supporting survivors, so that they get comprehensive support. We also work internationally. A landmark development was the Sustainable Development Goal on Modern Slavery 8.7, which was achieved partly with the lobbying of Pope Francis. And in 2017, the British Prime Minister Theresa May launched a call for action at the UN, which really set out all the things that we think make a comprehensive and effective response to modern slavery. And I believe over 80 countries have now signed up to that. So it's trying to get everybody to tackle it in the same way. And again, we saw lots of synergy with the religious sisters. So Talitha Kum, as you will know, is a worldwide organization of network of sisters working on modern slavery. So we have done a couple of projects with them. The first is training courses on leadership training for women working to tackle modern slavery in Cameroon and Burkina Faso, and disseminating materials among the groups of Talitha Kum in Burkina Faso and Niger to support their work there. And then the second project is on research work into the trafficking routes in sub-Saharan Africa between Malawi and South Africa. And then in the coming financial year, we will be doing more awareness raising workshops in Mozambique, and we will be publishing with them, or they will be publishing with our support, the results of their research work. So just to finish off, to say why we work with the women religious. So there are things that governments are good at and things that governments aren't so good at. We feel we're good at the legislative framework at home and international cooperation through the UN. But the things that are really challenging for governments to do are to get out prevention messages worldwide, and indeed to work with victims worldwide. And that's where we feel the religious orders have huge strengths. So I've just put a couple of statistics in there, but there are around 670,000 religious sisters worldwide. So that's a lot of people organized in over 2,000 orders. And they have global networks. I mean, Talitha Kum is present in 77 countries and 5 continents. So it really is a global network that reaches all parts of the globe. But there are things about the way the sisters work that we really like too. So I'm not a Catholic, and one of the things that I've discovered here is how the religious orders in general look at what they're doing every 5 or 6 years and ask themselves whether they're doing the right thing. So they're very responsive. They don't go off on a course. They constantly ask themselves if they're providing help where help is most needed. And I think that's what's taken them into working with survivors of both sexual violence and modern slavery, that they're responsive to need, and they see this need and they're flexible in responding to it. I've put here they're not resource constrained, which I'm sure any religious sisters will argue with. But what I mean by that is, when we as the British government provide help for survivors, we have a set number of days that they can access help, and then the funding after that stops. Whereas I think the sisters provide help as long as it's needed, and often that's quite a long time. So they really work with the need that they see in the survivors themselves. And then finally, and most importantly, the big issue on sexual violence and on modern slavery is about changing minds, on stopping people thinking this is acceptable. And of course, the church in general and the sisters in particular have moral authority. So they are very effective at carrying prevention messages, and they're trusted in areas where sometimes state structures are not so trusted. So they can do things that we can't do in persuading people not to be taken in by the stories of the traffickers, or not to be convinced by promises of high-paying jobs in Europe, in a way that that government messaging can never do. So women are at the heart, we think, of British foreign policy. They're at the heart of many of our global campaigns, including sexual violence in modern slavery. And in partnering with the religious sisters, we feel that we can make more impact, and that we can be more effective in achieving our goals. So that's why we work with them, and that's why we think they're very important to ending some of the global challenges that we're all working on. Thank you.
Grazie mille, signor Ambasciatore.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your interesting presentation. And now we should like to share with you a video by the popular movement Mahia in India, from the religious Good Shepherd with the Dalit community.
మహిళలకి నా అంతర్జాతీయ మహిళా దినోత్సవ
Auguro
సపోర్ట్ గా వచ్చిన మగవాళ్ళకి నా ధన్యవాదాలు.
For the past 30 years, I am in this congregation working with the Dalit community for the past 20 years or so, especially working with the women and children and organizing the community of people to work towards their development at all levels. India is a beautiful country with all its multi-religious, multicultural and multi-linguistic. The development that is taking place is quite fast. While we see a lot of developments at one side, we also see the other part of the country that is also struggling, especially in the rural base. You see so much of poverty, so much of illiteracy. There is a division of the caste, the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Sudras, and those don't belong to this ladder of castes. They are called the Dalits, the no people at all. They are broken people. These, at all levels, they have been taking the back seat. And when it comes to the gender, and this is another discrimination that is taking place.
When I came here, I saw the situation of Dalit women and the girls. And they were very naive, very docile, and I felt they were triply oppressed because of their gender, because of their caste, because of their economic situation. So I felt it was important that we begin something in order to change the situation. So that is how we began the work. And in 1987, we started an organization for women's rights.
There is a discrimination taking place. The Dalit and the tribal community, the boy is given preference even in education. The girl education does not matter because she is going to go to another house after her marriage. She is not going to bring in income to the family at all. She is not going to take care of the parents. It's the boy who is going to take care of the parents. It's the boy who is going to bring in income. Girl is not wanted. Boys are wanted. And boys are being celebrated. Girl child is a curse for the family because girl is an expense. She is a liability. So when I know I am carrying a female baby, there is a pressure. Should I carry this female child? Should I not carry the female child? My in-laws are not happy. My husband is not happy. So therefore, there is a decision taken whether I carry it through or I abort. So from the womb itself becomes the tomb for many girl children.
It is the patriarchy in our society which is the root cause of this kind of a situation. We began to take up many atrocities or violence against women, especially Dalit women. There were cases of kidnapping, cases of rape, and cases of upper caste men exploiting the Dalit women. We had taken up about 500 cases of such. Especially dowry deaths were very prevalent here. Dowry death happens when a girl or her family is not able to pay the dowry that had been agreed upon at the time of marriage. And if that does not happen, the husband's family begin to harass her. And it reaches a point, one day, the family plans to eliminate her.
The project Economic Empowerment of Dalit and Tribal Women through Human Rights Education and Economic Development. This project aims towards empowering the women at all levels, socially, politically, and also economic. Making her aware of her own rights as a human person and what are her capacity as a human person to excel in whatever she is able to accomplish. We are not just touching the women alone. So we are also looking at the men, the husbands coming together as a group. And how are they going to support this endeavor, the women's endeavor? I think complementing each other is very, very important. When we look for an equal society, it's not just giving attention to one part of the humanity, but it is important also the other part of the humanity. While we say they are the oppressors, why not address the oppressors themselves? Charity kills initiative. And by giving something, no system will change. But by organizing people, especially these oppressed people, if they can rise up they can fight for their own rights. Here we see a small beginning in the people's life. And I think this small beginning is going to be going to bring great change in their life, and also a greater impact in the society, because this is a witness that people are giving.
And now we should like to hand over to Flaminia Giovanelli. She has been at the services of the Holy See for 43 years. From January 2010 to July 2017, she's been Undersecretary of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, and in the period 2017 to late August 2018, she's been Undersecretary of the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, and she's President of Oviedo Onlus Association, and she's member of the Peace Prize Committee and International Council on Human Trafficking of St. Thomas School of Law, Miami, Florida. And she will deal with women challenges taken up in the 43 years to the Holy See. Over to you, madam. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me and for giving me the floor. I'm very happy because now I'm retired, so thank you for inviting me. No, I'm retired. It has been for me also the occasion to rethink back of the years I've spent in my service at the Holy See, and to recap all of them in a few minutes for my speech. So I thought to articulate my short intervention without the very beautiful means of communication that you've used. But mine is a sort of witness on 4 major challenges that I've selected. Well, the first challenge has been to be a leader in a world of men. And I've been unaware of this. It didn't seem to me to be such an important thing, because I never thought of it. So things came on smoothly. But I have to say that also thanks to the superiors, very enlightened superiors I had, and the fact that I've made progress in my career within the Holy See, well, this has helped me, and the fact that I was aged helped me because I was respected for my age. Over the years, I've seen the awareness about the importance of women in the Holy See to be on the grow, and also the number of women in leadership positions. And also, this is also true in civilian life. Now, of course, there's still much to be done, but there's also a need to try and find places where men and women can cooperate. So there's still much to be done, and the church, no doubt, has to make an important contribution if everything is looked at with hope and with a positive look, a proactive look. For example, in the missionary world, this partnership is much more evident. And I've always admired this exchange between men and women missionaries. There's something to be borrowed from it. Well, the second challenge when I was young was to make the Vatican acceptable, because in the early years of my service there was late 1970s, early 1980s, so the period immediately after the council. And when I attended meetings of Justice and Peace Committee, there was hostility, but there was I was looked at with a great suspicion at that time. So I tried to do my best and to make efforts, and I followed the advice of Cardinal Echegaray. So I complained with him, and he told me, you have to be twice as kind or twice as gentle. So I tried to do this in friendship by estimating the people. I had contacts with the most of them were people working on the ground. So one thing is to be a member of an institution, whereas tackling concrete issues is yet another thing. And of course, I was most welcoming with Catholic-inspired associations, organizations, justice and peace committees, and also religious members, because you know that sometimes prophecy is sometimes at odds with institutions, and there might be frictions coming out of it. But I admired them because they are those who work on the ground, on the spot. So I tried to have exchanges with them and to listen to the experiences of this church truly lived out. And that exchange was of a paramount importance. And I did the same with the young people. So I had so lucky as to work in the library, in the documentation center. So I received many students. The Vatican always had its door open in the statutes, in the bylaws of Justice and Peace Committee. There was written that we had to be welcoming with the young people, finding information. So we've been facilitated in this. So there was this welcoming young people. I've seen a journalist who followed an internship period. And sometimes it's difficult to organize internship periods, but for young people, this is an open window on the world, and this is extraordinary, the fact of living in an international framework as is a Holy See office. A third challenge, and this has always been a sort of duty for me, was to bring together ethics of life and ethics of justice and peace. I've always tried to make people understand that these two things went hand in hand. It was not always easy, because sometimes there are polarizations that we do live on an everyday basis, namely in the Western world. And this is something that has been disturbing to me, to say the truth. So I've tried when organizing conferences or in my exchanges with young people, with my young cooperators, I always try to let them understand that we were dealing with the presence of the church in the world and of Christians in the world. Well, yes, of course, but we should not forget what we are. And I have to say the truth, I found in Gaudete et Exultate, numbers of paramount importance on this theme. Number 100 and number 101. I'm not going to read the whole of them, but a few lines. I think that's worthy reading. Pope Francis writes, defending the innocent who was not birth shall be our defense of the innocent unborn, for example, needs to be clear, firm and passionate, for at stake is the dignity of a human life, which is always sacred and demands love for each person, regardless of his or her stage of development. Equally sacred, however, are the lives of the poor, those already born, the destitute, the abandoned, and the underprivileged, the vulnerable, infirm, and the elderly, exposed to covert euthanasia. And in one of my latest initiatives, I've tried to put this in practice because I think that these words are of paramount importance. Though sometimes they might be disturbing, but we've published a document that is found on the web in many languages because the position, it's the position of the Holy See on Agenda 2030. It's found in all UN official languages. So, well, I think that one of the most important, I think this is a reference point of paramount importance on this issue. So I think it's worth reading. And the last challenge on which I should like to draw your attention, this has been a sort of existential challenge of all my life, has been to try to put together action and reflection. Reflection is the major task of Justice and Peace Committee. So the fact of deepening the social teaching of the Church, that was a task for reflection. But it is also true that the social teaching of the Church is a set of values, principles that are elaborated on then for action to take place. So it's not near academia. And so, of course, for the person of my generation, the works of mercy, we've always seen them done. My mother has always helped the poor. So the fact of being committed for the others was second nature for people of my age. But I also happened to make experiences, for example, during my service for some 10 years. I had to take care of my mother. She was really deceased, so I had to follow her, and this took a lot of my time. I always say that this was the experience of my life, so I've been supported by the work I was doing and the people around me, because it was very difficult, painful task on the one hand, but it was exalting on the other hand, because accompanying someone at the end of their life is very important, and it was very much helped by my colleagues, the religious people. They were praying for me, they were supported me, they were asking for news about my mother. So, and they were very flexible. When new skills at the dicastery started in terms of healthcare, I could make the most of that experience of accompanying an aged person, because of course these questions you about euthanasia, the end of life, and this concrete accompaniment, and you see that these people are very attached to life. Another experience I've done over the last few years is to work for this association, and the presenter mentioned it. This association is called O Viveiro. It's in Portuguese, because this is an Italian association supporting a project, an initiative in Mozambique, in an area where people are very, very poor. And we have a shelter for young girls and to fight against early marriages, for promoting these young girls, for them to be provided with education and integral formation. Now, the most beautiful thing of this project is that it was born there, and it is run by local people according to local needs. The lay members, a couple of Mozambican lay members, and they are truly a very good example. So this has been very beautiful experience, and it still is. Now, all this has been supported by my former job at the Vatican within the framework of Justice Peace Committee and the dicastery for promoting integral human development. So a conference was organized on water. This is one of the major issues of development, and so I was asked to witness the daily fight for water. So the director of this Viveiro Center was invited at this conference on water, and this was a personal satisfaction to see how an institution gets closer and closer to concrete daily life. So I think that both things together are part of the philosophy of this new dicastery that was very much wanted by the Holy See. So he wanted this new dicastery to reflect upon, to study, to deepen this study and the pastoral care of all the other dicasteries. Well, this is not an easy task, but I wish them most fruitful job. Thank you.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much, Madam, for this intervention, for this testimony full of life and of very beautiful values. And now we're going to listen to Martina Lepsche. Ms. Lepsche works at Caritas. She has been working there since 1984 at multiple levels, local, regional, and world. Since 2010, she's advocacy director of Caritas Internationalis, now promoting women in leadership positions and developing recommendations for our governance within a group of them is part of her responsibilities. Other issues responsibility for migration, human trafficking, food security, and climate change. And she's graduated in social services, and she will be dealing with experiences with and for women for promoting integral human development. Over to you, Madam. You have the floor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Morning to everyone. Thank you to my friends from WUCWO. Thank you to Ambassador from Peru and from the UK for inviting me to be part of this panel. I think I have to decide whether I take the privilege that I'm the last one, so I can talk as long as I want, or I have to speak. No, I know. I will try to be synthetic also because I think many things have been said. So I think it shows that we have a line together. So yes, Caritas Internationalis, the network of 164 member organizations, works on integral human development. And of course, one of their groups with whom they work is are women. And to Caritas, development means building a world in which we all live without fear of hunger and injustice, peacefully coexisting, providing for ourselves and protecting our planet. We focus on the root causes and multiple effects of poverty and on bringing the empowered voices of communities into the political process. And I think in the case of women, for me, the word, and for Caritas, the word empowerment is key. And this means to create opportunities for education in order for them to develop their talents, to support their organization. And it was very visible in the film about the Dalits. In fact, I had an example about working with Dalits as well. So to provide access to and connect them with structures which have a say about their life in order to empower them. You may have heard the lady in the video say, charity doesn't change. It's really giving the power to the people that they organize themselves and they fight for their own, for their own rights. And it's a participatory process which begins at the levels of home and community. And I was about to talk about a project in India. Caritas India is working with Dalits as well. In the region of Bihar, and they are trying to do what was shown in the film as well, to do trainings, to make them know their rights. And a colleague of mine shared the project report with me, and they say, we see progress, and people or the women are quite bold now to denounce the injustices against them. So some of them suffered torture, for example, by higher caste police officers or men. And so they are able to come to denounce this. But on the other hand, they say the process is also, the progress is slow, which means you have to really do long-term projects there, because they say the fear of all the injustices which they have suffered is still in their, well, in their body, in their minds. And I think one key issue is the information about the rights of women. And I was thinking while listening to the video and listening to the other interventions, that in Africa we are having a program which is about the promotion of the right to food. This is linked with the Agenda 2030. And so 6 African Caritas, they also work with communities to tell them that something like the right to food exists, for example, which not everyone knows. And then what does it have? What kind of practical implications does it have? And again, in a report, a woman was quoted who said, it was the first time that someone came to our community to tell us our rights. So this shows how important this is. I also wanted to share another example of work of which we probably do not think so much. And this is about fisher women. Normally, when we think about fishing, we think about men. But in some countries, like in Costa Rica, for example, women, there are fisher women who have to maintain their families by fishing. They fish something which is called piangas, which is a kind of mollusk, I understand. And these fisher women, in comparison to men, were paid less, were partly marginalized. And so the church, they were Catholic in big part. They came to church, they talked to the priest, and then they were helped by the church to become organized and build cooperatives. And the president of one of these cooperatives said, in the occasion of the first Congress in the country about small-scale fishery and specifically women in November 2018, the president said, this first Congress is very important as it gathers a significant number of small-scale artisan fisher folk and mollusk fishers. This sector has been forgotten, excluded, and is thus very vulnerable. The alliance with the Catholic Church and other stakeholders is fundamental in the fight for our rights and for a better future of these communities in coherence with the preservation of our coast. So that's where the ecological aspect comes in. Women are part of the fishing value chain, for a long time undervalued and unknown. So I think this is another group of women which we probably do not have in our focus every day, and I think it's a very important part. But we are not only looking outside, so into the communities, we are currently having a look into our organization with regards to women's issue. So at our last General Assembly, a group of women wanted to meet the Secretary General, saying there are a lot of women working in Caritas, but we don't see that reflected in the leadership positions. So could I ask the technicians to put on my slides, please? So currently, you can see in 164 member organizations, currently we have 37 women as directors. So this makes something like 22%. So they are directors of Caritas organizations. And the next slide, please. I just said as a way of comparison, this is the percentage of women in parliaments worldwide. It's the International Parliamentary Union who provides these figures. It's of 1st of December 2018. So we are not so bad, let's say, compared to the parliamentarians, but a lot more needs to be done. Thank you. You can put off the slides. So the women said, we want to work on this issue. How can we get more women in leadership positions? And we also want to have our own space. So the decision is that at our next General Assembly now this year in May, there will be a women's forum to which also men are invited. That was made very explicit. And to prepare this women's forum, we did a survey among our member organizations addressed to women, and almost the same questions were addressed to men. And we are still analyzing the survey. I can say that we had, in comparison to other surveys we sent out, we had a record high feedback, which made us very happy. And I think I just will give a few ideas about what were the results, but it's not the final. We are still analyzing them, and we are analyzing more specifically. We received over 1,000 comments, and we are analyzing these comments. But I think one of the issues which came out was with regard to taking up leadership position in Caritas was the responsibility for taking care of the children and wider family. And I think you made an example, Flaminia. So this is still a challenge. And this was said both by women and men, which means that we are still in the, let's say, more or less classical role model in Caritas. And another reason for taking it up, that was a quarter of the respondents also mentioned cultural or religious barriers. But on the other hand, you have also to say, so it's not a survey which brought out, I don't know, sensations, but it's mixed results, let's say. On the other hand, the majority of women declared that they were very happy with the arrangements in their organization, allowing them to work and to take care of their children. So there is, in the majority of cases, a supportive environment. Another result was that working in Caritas, both for men and women, is socially motivated. So people do not go to Caritas to make a professional career, but it's rather to work for because of their social motivation. And then a question was asked, what do women in leadership positions contribute to the organization? And women answered it would be more creativity, more commitment, more organizational skills, and a better image. And men, it's not totally different, but with another angle, said that it would really improve the image of the organization vis-a-vis donors as being an inclusive one. As you know, many donors nowadays ask the question about equality between men and women. And I think amongst the comments which came out, I'm going towards the end. I think one of the issues which was mentioned was to give incentives also to men, for example, to take parental leave. That was one of the recommendations some women came. So we are curious about how this women's forum will work. The idea is to discuss, to bring women together and who come to the General Assembly and to provide recommendations. My final very short point is a question which I've been thinking of. Very often when you read official documents, women are always mentioned as women are vulnerable, women are vulnerable. On the other side, I have met so many strong women that I was saying, well, where is it? So, for example, I was traveling to Honduras recently to the Latin American Caritas conference, and we had a women's forum there as well. And the president of Caritas sent a message to this women forum saying, thanks to you women for making our institutions worthy, human, full of hope, and always open to the future. And he was also paying tribute to the women in his country, Venezuelan women who show extraordinary strength. And on my way to this forum, I happened to miss my flight connection, and I was stranded in El Salvador with a group of 10 Hondurans. I was the only foreigner in that group, These were migrants traveling back home to see their families. And it was such a heart, warming experience. So after we realized we were 10, the first ones who started to get organized were women. The first ones to started to talk to each other were women. The first ones to deal with the airline were women. and so eventually we ended up in a hotel, and there were Honduran women, and I had the privilege to hear their stories of strength, of determination, but also silent suffering. So there was one lady, her name was Sara, and she was living in Spain, and she had a son of 11 years old back home. And unfortunately, she had to leave the country at a young age because her partner was shot. And so she was afraid that she would be also sued, but she did not see a way to bring her son. So she came back home, or was on the way back home. And I said, will your son be happy to see you? And she said, I don't know if he's happy to see his mother or if he's happy because I'm bringing him a T-shirt of FC Barcelona, which is sad and funny as well. So I think we say that women are vulnerable, and certainly in many parts of the world they are, also due to structural causes, but we should also not forget their strength and build on it. And a colleague of mine in a recent report said, it is important to remember that vulnerability always comes with resilience, and to recognize the agency of migrants and affected communities. Even when they face unthinkable difficulties, they show great strength and capacity to resist their situations. I think the same can be said about all women. So I thank all the strong women for being an example of hope that change is possible. I've learned a lot from them. Thank you.
I'm afraid I have to go, so I'm not going to be able to stay for questions. I apologize very much to our host, but thank you very much for inviting me. I've very much enjoyed it.
Grazie, signora.
So we should like to thank Madam the Ambassador. Thank you very much for your intervention. And let's move on to the Q&A session, and it will be guided, directed by our President. So over to you.
Será un placer iniciar el diálogo con ustedes.
It will be a pleasure to start off the Q&A session with you, though some have to go off. Of course, we understand that we are a little bit late, but we would like to have short questions for an interactive interplay, so not only questions, but also commentaries, comments. But before saying your question or your comments, tell your name and the country you come from, and if your question is to this or that speaker. So we're going to start with the people attending this meeting in the room. It seems to me that also those who are following us through streaming can take the opportunity of participating in the Q&A session. So after hearing so many words, now over to you. You have the floor.
Yes, you have the floor.
Melissa Hitchman, Australian Ambassador to the Holy See. Thank you, President and Chair. My question is directed to Dottoressa Giovanelli. Thank you very much for this inspiring event today, all of you. A couple of weeks ago, we had the meeting for the protection of minors in the church, and I think many of us as women and as diplomats and as global citizens were uplifted that women were invited to that meeting. They were invited there in their own right through the UISG, 10 women there, and 3, of course, were speakers at the meeting. That is a very good development from the Holy See and something that many of us would look to be replicated in synods in the future. Of course, the deliberations out of that meeting, we've been told there will be months before there will be some outcomes, but in Holy See terms, that's really rather fast, which is another welcome development. I wonder if you can offer any reflections, given your long and path-breaking career in the Holy See, as to whether you see women in positions of leadership more and more. Obviously, we know there's Diva now, Donna in Vaticana, in the Holy See, and we see women in positions of leadership, yourself, and in the family laity and life elsewhere as under-secretaries, but we haven't, with the exception of Barbara Yatta, seen someone in the full leadership position as she is at the Vatican Museums. Women, obviously, as we've been talking about, are part of the solution. How do you see that reflected and reflecting the global church as well as the Holy See as a state in international law? Do you have anything to offer in terms of encouragement as to where the Holy See and His Holiness Pope Francis might go in recognising the contribution that women have to make, not only as reflecting the church itself, but in leadership positions? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for asking this question. It's not easy to answer this question because I've seen this progress made. So there's this positive side. I've seen this. What I was saying in my intervention before is that I feel it is important to try and understand the role of women together with men, because there's this risk at stake. There might be this risk also within the church to see two parallel streams, to put it this way, that women deepen because, as we know it for long, I don't want to see two parallel streams, so we should try and avoid this. I was mentioning the example of the missionary world because I feel that amongst the missionaries, this partnership, men-women partnership, might be sort of, how to put it, sort of a guideline, a concrete guideline, an effective guideline, because they put this partnership in the daily work, on the spot, on the ground, but there's still much to be studied. So we do hope that the last meeting, the last summit on minor protection has been a lane, and we do hope that this will be capitalized on. Thank you.
Fermina Álvarez, soy oficial de la Santa Sede, trabajo.
I'm an officer of the Holy See. I work at the Secretary of State International Section. I've been working there for 20 years by now. And I say so to let you understand, as Flaminia has just said, that I've seen a very positive evolution development over the last few years, and I can see that at the Secretariat of State, 1/4 is made up of women working there, and there are women in every role. Well, my work has the same value as Monsignor's. I work at the international section, so I follow the work of Catholic or Catholic-inspired NGOs in these organizations. And this is the reason that I accepted with great pleasure to attend this meeting and to support WUCWO in all their initiatives. I should like to seize this opportunity also to thank WUCWO for having held this very positive initiative. Well, personally speaking, I feel that the reflection on the role of women within the church has to be seen in a larger reflection on the role of lay members within the church. We should not separate women as being a separate being, but she has to be seen a part of a larger framework, i.e. the role that the lay members can have within the world, within the church, within the viewpoint of Catholic theology. And within this concept, we have to analyze the specific role of women that men cannot play, and that is due to our own nature. So we need to be aware of this. We need to be aware of ourselves and to be able to act. The Pope in the last meeting of last week about sexual abuse and protection of minors has said very beautiful, genuine words. We all know that in many cases of these are the result of the subproduct of excessive machism, even within the church. And it is for this reason that maybe the lay members of the church have made a step backward, so they have surpassed us, or maybe we have not understood our role as protagonists, and that we had to cooperate in a world where not only priests but also lay members have to make their witness. So this confusion brings about negative results. And last but not least, about the question asked by the Australian ambassador. Well, over the years, I've seen that in the synods, I've seen great participation of women. I've been the witness of this. So I should like to thank you for raising this issue and for stressing the participation of women. So we are in a pathway. There's a need to think about global vision and see the role of women within this framework. I can see that it is equally important, and this has not been mentioned, the capability of interiorizing the spirituality that we, the women, we do have. We have many examples of women saints who have been leaders, protagonists in their own ages. And I think there's a need to point out that this capability of women of resisting in spirituality. And this is where we, the women, we draw strengths to support and to make families united. Thank you. Thank you very much, Fermina. So we should like to thank you. And I should like to hand over to Maria Giovanna Ruggeri now.
Okay, grazie.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity of reflecting upon these themes. Now, going back to the question asked by the Australian ambassador. Well, she suggested me a few reflections that I want to share with you. On the one hand, when there's this request for participation, leadership within the church, I always wonder, is this a question of service or power? If it's a question of service, well, I fully agree on pursuing this campaign, this support for a greater participation of women. If it's a question of power, I'm not interested in it. I do not find it to be useful, helpful in terms of women's participation within the church. Fermina has anticipated the issue about the importance of lay members. There's a need for lay members to go better heeded within the church, but this is a concern at local level for me, because this issue of the presence of women and respect for women, well, we organize these summit meetings, but then on the level of parishes, of parish councils, of local realities, what of all this arrives on a local level. So I'm very much concerned that all this remains a reflection that we do, but then we are not able to get to the grassroots. So the commitment of Caritas, but also of WUCWO, and of religious sisters is to insist on grassroots levels for people to fully understand this, and for them to understand that this is a question of a service, not of power, because we do not want to enter mechanisms that do not belong to the church. Thank you.
Gracias, María Jo.
We should like to thank Maria Giovanna. Technicians, could you please inform me if there are questions via streaming? I will make a comment in Portuguese. I'm the ambassador of East Timor to the Holy See. And this issue, let me think and let me remind of another theme that I witnessed back in 1974. At that time, about women's empowerment. For quite a long time, I've supported this, as well as equal opportunities between men and women by participating in many international conferences. And in one of these conferences, I've seen a woman from Africa, and she asked a question, and a bishop answered. The question was, what is the genital organ of God? Now, the presence of women in the world, for me, is that God created men and women, but there's a new tendency in the world, a new trend, i.e. Gender equality, a new vision. Division, injustice, and inequality, these are the root causes of all evils. So I fully agree with all the people who took the floor today. They said that we need to be complemented with one another and cooperate together, work together. And now I should like to ask you, what is your viewpoint, the viewpoint of WUCWO? What is your viewpoint in order to strengthen this cooperation between men and women? Thank you. We are a public international organization, and this means that we identify ourselves with the church, and this is not a question of obedience. We do not do this by convention. It seems to us that the woman in the church, as has already been said, has much to do and much more to offer. And this is not necessarily to do with the sacred order. The sacred order declared by the magisterium for men can be complemented, can be enriched, can be helped, as the Virgin Mary has done with the participation of all the apostles in the Pentecost. there's no Pentecost without Mary. And so we cannot understand the church without women having a decision power. And this is what the Pope has said from the very beginning of his pontificate in his first conference that he has had. He has delivered the woman is not only to do to play the role of a catechist, but she has to do decision power with men. She has to have the capability of making decisions. And for this, there's still much to be done. It's not a question of whether we have the right numbers. If we are able, if we are apt, we can do a lot. Imagine if, for example, in workshops, in seminars, in if we had women formators in seminarians, maybe the education of priests would be better. I feel it would be better, and this is true of also other fields of activities. So I feel that our position is all too clear. Well, we do not have questions from streaming. So we have 20 countries, and we will be said how many people we have in streaming connection with us. So hi everybody. It has been a pleasure to have you all participating, and we are here to answer your questions. So should you have any questions, of course. Do you have any other questions or comments here in the room? Otherwise, we get this to a conclusion.
Sí.
Me gustaría hacer un comentario.
I should like to make a comment to clarify a thing. I fully agree with what Maria Giovanna said. It's not only a question of power, but also, and above all, of service. But what is most important, I was discussing with a friend of mine, because we were speaking and talking on how to put women in a strategic framework plan. And he said, because they can improve, women can improve the things we do. But it's not a question of doing, it's a question of being, it's a question of representativity. We have conducted a research in our office. There are 22 women and 18 men in our office. And the question was, how can we better represented? So there's no need for parallel streams, but there's a need for cooperation, for complementarity, to have complementary roles as men and women. And we have to educate men to understand, for them to understand that there's a change, there's a new paradigm, and there's a need for a different kind of action. Thank you.
No, es que hay que esperar un poquito, porque así.
So we have to give the mic a little bit of time. Well, I think that the time of our meeting, such a fruitful meeting has come to a close. So I should like to hand over to our presenter for her to bring this to a conclusion. To conclude, let me provide you a few points. In these pink envelopes you've been given at your entering, you're going to find a questionnaire. It's very important for us that you fill it in. Also, for those who are connected in streaming, it will be interesting for us that you could leave something written to make a comment, and you've already been enabled to this online. Then we've been informed that 21 people from many different countries are following us, from Spain, Venezuela, the Lebanon, UK, France, Australia, the Philippines, Egypt, Nigeria, Tanzania, Kenya, and many others. And sorry if I have forgotten some countries, some people, it's very beautiful to think that there's a lot of us united from across the world. So I should like to thank, before the final prayer, I should like to thank in the name of WUCWO, the UK Embassy to the Holy See and the Peru Embassy speakers. They have honored us with their presence and their testimonies. All the participants present here in Rome and in many other countries from the world, UISG for the technology, and members of their staff that have helped us, interpreters, technicians, the working groups of institutions that have organized and supported this event, the maintenance personnel and security staff and the catering service, and all those who have made this very beautiful event possible. Thank you all. Thank you. And I should like to thank Cristina, our presenter. Thank you, Cristina. Now I should like to invite you to conclude this meeting with the final prayer together with the Woman of Hope, Mother Teresa of Calcutta.
I thirst, I thirst, I thirst for souls, come to me. I thirst, I thirst, who will help bring them to me? Bring them to my Father, wash them in my blood, bind their wounds of sin by the power of my love. Tell them of my mercy, show to them my heart, pierced and ever broken, with love to impart. I thirst, I thirst, I thirst for souls, come to me. I thirst, I thirst, who will help bring them to me? Many tears are falling, souls have lost their way, tired and discouraged, too broken to pray. Will you be my tenderness? All the world will see. I am always waiting. Please come to me. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. I thirst, I thirst, I thirst for souls, come to me.